Hey everybody, this is PD from the Spinner Rack. We also have
Calvin Ellis, ready to rock.
today we do our memorial of the great John Romita, the classic artist. He was an artist on both companies early on in his career. He did some Captain America in the 50s. He did some romance for both companies in the at the end, towards the end of the 50s. Then he left comics only to be dragged back by Stan Lee, where he was immortalized as one of the best artists that they had there. At least his look would be the look for Marvel, at least the faces. The form might be what Kirby did and or what what's the name? What John Buscema kind of extrapolate from that. But here's a caricature of him with the Spider-Man characters that some he created, some that he took on, but he took the book to took Spider-Man from number 2 to number 1. So it was a healthy move. This would happen during this time, same when Kirby left and John Buscema did it. But it was such a book that was connected with Ditko and his style and his personality that the book just kept going with the book had legs with John Romita, and John Romita also was which he said he struggled with plotting the book, but he got used to it, and he even said, talking about the death of Gwen Stacy, that he plotted it with was it Jerry Conway, and getting the what would happen and the writing kind of adding the snap added a whole nother thing to it. So he was very much a process of Marvel sort of storyteller. He was very humble as far as what he was doing. But any first words from you, Cal?
Well, again, we've lost yet another comic book giant, and it really saddens me because the way the comics are going right now, I mean, it's totally different, but we just don't have anyone else who seems like they're going to be giant. I mean, you look at somebody like John Romita, and he comes on specifically with Spider-Man, when he comes on, and what he does becomes the look, like the official house look of what Spider-Man is supposed to look like, and it stays like that in licensing for a long time, and then it governs the way that the comics are going to go from there. It just doesn't, it just doesn't really happen any longer. I mean, I understand that it's a different time. A lot of these things are set. Part of the reasons why it's set is because of a guy like John Romita Sr. But it does greatly sadden me because these guys. I mean, they're not going to be here forever. But at the same point, there's never another John Romita Sr. But at the same point, you just don't really, at least for me, I don't really feel that anybody else comes down the pike, to do what these guys did. Maybe they do something even bigger, but definitely just feels like there's a void just keeps getting bigger and bigger every year, and there's really nobody to fill it.
Yeah. One of the things, obviously, him doing stuff on Spider-Man, or not, I don't know how long, run on Captain America, where he inked himself a lot of those issues and redesigned. But most of the time, people say, I mean, thankfully he got some write-ups in the Times and the Hollywood Reporter. Someone that really wouldn't be that known to the public. But at the same time, if you've seen, as you described, his Spider-Man, a lot of the faces of Marvel, like he would, like that was his job as art director, to keep things in line. So even the Hulk's face, he would do stuff that keep whatever Stan had in mind, whatever Stan liked. Now, Stan kind of struggled with John Romita on Spider-Man because he wanted it to be, even though he liked the dynamics, he wanted the Peter Parker to not be as handsome. He struggled with Gwen Stacy not being as not being connecting to the audience as much as Mary Jane. And at some point he just said he just gave up. But despite that initial struggle, he basically would go through comic books and the covers and images, and he would just redraw faces, whichever ones he thought that Stan wouldn't like, and that's basically and Stan officially was okay with it all the time. I think he pushed back he didn't want to do it on a Thor issue. There's a Thor issue that Simonson did where I think Thor is walking the camera, and his face is all messed up, and he's walking the camera's like, it was a 351, and Shooter was like, I don't think this is right. So John, can you redraw this? And he was like, he really didn't want to do it because it also they knew that they could, sometimes the his peers would be like, let me just draw a face to see if John Romita will redraw it. And he's like, he's there to start redrawing, and then we saw Simonson's face. He's like, the Thor's kind of in a fight, so why should I really do this? And he hoping that Shooter would forget, which he did, and he didn't redraw it. So it's the classic look where you had the creation of it is synonymous with Marvel is synonymous with Kirby and Ditko and some of the other collaborators from the early on, but this look of not just Spider-Man but the faces of these characters and continuing the success of Marvel, even though the '70s was kind of rougher for comics, it was still selling a lot. So it's still keeping in line that look that he gave them. So that he those faces that he was giving the characters, even the Hulk, who's supposed to be a monster, was going to be that look. Let's say with Fantastic Four, it was more Joe Sinnott, but it was kind of getting these books. But a lot of the faces were Romita, where he would draw a cover and he would redraw a face on it, or he'd redo Spider-Man in your book type of deal if he showed up in it. If you saw something wrong, or just as mean, and as what's that thing? Romita's Raiders, and here I wanted to do sort of a later look of him being older. One of the old pros at Marvel with his Romita Raiders, and it's a picture of him, drawing all of the female characters. Where in this one we get Gwen as a platinum blonde, and I guess this is Virginia Romita back here. So who's the slave driver at Marvel, get people online with their books. So you got a lot of a lot of classic stuff from John Romita. But let's talk about what people like to talk about, his creations or his designs. Bring it out. What you tell them? What did he design?
Mary Jane Watson.
Definitely did Mary Jane. Who else?
I mean,
Big
well,
characters.
we can't just rush over Mary Jane Watson that fast. That's the big one.
That's
I mean,
definitely a big one. But
previous to a John Romita, one, you get that great sequence of, face the tiger, you hit the jackpot. And before that, we just got cameos of Mary Jane Watson. Either her head was wrapped in a scarf, or she was like an arm behind a plant or something of that nature. And so the buildup had to be when we finally saw her, especially since they were doing the whole bait and switch, that, we didn't get to see her. So, she's probably a dog or something. And Peter, definitely trying to duck out. So when we see her, that's, a big moment. I can't remember if it was a splash page or if it was just, I think it was if I
no,
remember, it was just
it's
it
a
was a full
small.
panel.
It's
It
a
was a full,
panel. Yeah.
it's a full, yeah. But,
Well, I think one of the things that I think a lot of people forgot that they never showed the face, but she was glamorous in description. So when they were doing it, Stan and John Romita was like, we're going against type. She's not going to be the dog that that Peter thinks, and at the same time, she never was supposed to be the dog. But I don't obviously,
well, no, because everybody was saying she was, and he was taking it like, oh, she's one of these girls with a great personality, right? I'm out of here. And
yeah,
it's his aunt and her friend were trying to set him up. He's like, what do they know? I'm out. I'm not going to be bothered with this. You're not going to set me up with this chick. But well, the other thing, Romita's time with I really think it's Romita's time with the romance comics that helps to set the stage for what he did with Spider-Man, because the romance comics is pure pretty people. It's a handsome guy, it's a pretty girl. It's a pretty girl, it's a handsome guy. There aren't any ugly people in the romance comics. They don't exist. I've read enough of the stories that even the ugly person is just usually the person with glasses and brown hair. That's the ugliest that they ever got. So when he gets over the Spider-Man, and yes, Stan is going to definitely have some issue with this, with the beautification that Romita was bringing. But it would be hard for me to see him doing anything else. And then Mary Jane is his creation. It's I know that he based Mary Jane Watson on Anne Margaret. So, he was taken from like Viva Las Vegas, or no, Bye Bye Birdie. So he was taking, he like, the shape, the outfits, all of that stuff. Gwen, Gwen wasn't his. So the connection and so on and so forth isn't going to be there, and it just wasn't there at the end of the day. So a lot of that stuff you can just see it happening. I mean, if Ditko had stayed on the book, we probably get something. We would have got something different altogether. But that didn't happen. We get what we get, and we get the major love interest. For Spider-Man for decades until Joe Quesada decides he knows better than everybody else. And when her appearance is this classic appearance that is one of these watershed moments in comics where it's just like a really big payoff, and a big reason for that was John Romita Senior's rendering of Mary Jane Watson. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a character that was a mainstay. I think in what was it? I don't know if the fans necessarily like same with Spider-Man and his personality. Like it's the only person I've heard describe her kind of the way she was in those early books. Because obviously Tom DeFalco, they tried to give her sort of a rougher background and a harsher backstory where she was mainly a party girl. The only person I heard say describe her in kind of the right way is as far as her character is was it Jennifer Tilly, where she was talking about she was a Spider-Man fan, and she was talking about how Mary Jane would like drive the guys crazy in the book. And it's like that's the perfect person to say that, because I'm pretty sure she. But it was kind of a not like a full-on airhead, but just a character that was just a party type of girl. Like she comes in, she's dancing, had all this energy. She has these things where she's dating Harry, but at the same time, it's like, "Hey, Peter, you want to come hang out?" He's like, "What is she doing?" She's like, so it was like kind of one of these characters that really was like knock over the apple carts, and they even tried to keep that going when she turned down Peter for marriage. She would come in where he would have some girlfriend, and he still let her keep the key to the place. But she has a touching moment, which is in the death of Gwen Stacy, where she, she's there for him, where she seems like, because you see how hard she was when he's upset with Gwen dying, and he's like telling her to just go out there, and, don't hang with us straights. And she takes it in shock, but at the same time, she closes the door and she stays with him, and then they kind of build this friendship, and they had their first kiss some point later, and she said, "Why didn't we do this sooner?" So she was just kind of the energy in the book. Whereas early in the book, which I connected with what's her name, Liz Allen and Betty Brant, which and I really liked the new Gwen when Gwen came in there, but she's very different. The one that everyone knows. I mean, Gwen is almost, with her passing, she kind of gains a lot of notoriety with the same amount as Mary Jane, but it was kind of while it was going on, they did everything they could to make Gwen like stand out. They look like sisters in this picture I have up here.
Yeah, well, I don't know. So that reminds me of like when I would look at the way they would design people for cartoons, and it was literally the same face. Everybody pretty much the same face, just darker hair, maybe different shaped eyes. But you got to get the books out on time. Got to get the books out on time.
So with that, let's. I want to get out of this thing here for a second.
Well, if you want to keep in the same mode with his big creations, I mean, for me, Mary Jane Watson. That's just
no. That's a good one. I'm not.
That's just
that.
Yeah, because his Spider-Man stuff his Spider-Man work is that's going to be the apogee of his career, the apex, and that was probably that's going to be the biggest character. But of course, well, for all you blaxploitation fans, Luke Cage. Again, and for all you people who like shoot 'em up, the Punisher.
Well, let's stick with Luke Cage for a second, right? So we had him get this great design, even though over time people will, yellow and this is comic books, so chill. Oh, you got a tiara? No, it's a metal headband. So it's just like, so people tear this apart, but at the time, it just was a fun character that became a Marvel mainstay. And even though Stan had some issue with this character, obviously you can see in this book, he was trying to make his way in Marvel. He was making his way as Marvel and became kind of a mainstay with him and Power Man and Iron Fist. But definitely, we
But
had.
look,
Hmm?
I don't know if the people ever got it. Luke Cage is not a superhero when we meet him. Luke Cage is a hero for hire. Okay, he's pretty much a mercenary. And he decides, well, I need a costume. And if you look at the costume, that's what he thinks superheroes are supposed to look like. That's Luke. Like, hey, I gotta get these guys. I got one guy running around dressed like a flag, other guys dressed like a spider. Look at this one, look at that one. Okay, so you just pretty much, I mean, he pretty much just cobbles some stuff together. It's like, all right, this looks pretty flamboyant. Let me go over here and do whatever needs to be done. And literally, for Luke Cage has more of a costume that, at least for me, than any other character at that time. And he's trying to approximate what the other guys wear. Okay, you notice there's no, where everybody else may have the symbol right there in the middle of the chest. His symbol is just the open chest.
Hmm.
Like he's going to a club or something. It's a bright color. I got this. All right. Okay, good. I'm ready. Okay, I'm here. I'm distinctive. Give me my money so I can come over here. What do you need? All right. You have any money? Okay, good. We can get this done.
Well, that's the thing. I think with with Stan, when they, I guess when they came up with it, and they decided to have him have a disappear, not his first appearance, but like appear in Spider-Man, kind of like they decided, hey, Spider-Man would have some issue with this guy taking money for being a superhero, and it's like that's like what Spider-Man was doing early on, and upset when, hey, Fantastic Four, I should get a top salary with you guys. And this one is like, you going out there for money is like, dude.
And he kept and he kept on doing it. Later on, he goes to the Avengers because he wants to get paid. He found out
Yes.
how much the Avengers were getting a week in terms of a stipend, and he's like, he breaks into Avengers
Yeah.
Mansion,
Yeah.
saying, "I'm here." You
Yeah.
know,
So that's the thing. So you mentioned the Punisher. This is one of Marvel's greatest secrets. Obviously, I think the issue was drawn by Ross Andrew, but the design itself was by John Romita. Obviously, the create Jerry Conway tells him what he's thinking, and then you get the what the character is, and the design itself is by John Romita. So this is one of Marvel's greatest secret. They just had him sitting here. It wasn't a big deal, and then they did a backup thing. I think Marvel premiere with this character. Still wasn't a big deal. It was a magazine. Still wasn't a big deal. And he showed up, and fans would be like, "Oh yeah, cool." And Captain America, you see him standing over the shield, got the gun at the cap. It's like, "Oh, sweat." Then Daredevil killing it in Daredevil, and then next thing you know, they have the miniseries by Mike Zeck is finally free of the Secret Wars, and the breakout thing is Punisher is a hit. The regular series a big hit, big enough hit. There's another series after this, so it's one of a couple of Marvel's greatest secret where people are trying to figure out who's going to be the next guy. And he wasn't the next guy, but he was the guy after the next guy. So before we get to that guy, what else? I think I'm gonna mess this up. I think I'm gonna mess this up. Do I have it ready? No, I don't. It's that. Is this the right one? Yeah, Kingpin. Let's not forget the Kingpin. This is a classic Stan character who's heavy type of character, and even though Marvel gave up on him in the '70s, he made a big comeback in the '80s, and he's in Spider-Man. He's in the TV shows. He's in the Into the Spider-Verse. So he's stamped his way in the comics, and now we got to get to the big one. You want to say it?
no, I'll let you take that one. Big one for me is Mary Jane.
I'm saying what people are talking about. They should have said it in the paper, but I expect them not to. But Wolverine, he designed Wolverine. They didn't have a face at this point, but the costume design. Wolverine actually has many people that helped him along and carried the baton, but obviously the initial people only really care about the initial person, the first draw, and he came up with that design and the claws and whatnot. Even though the claws are only part of the gloves, some of the mainstays in here, the claws, the big belt, the actual boots, and the costume was redesigned and redesigned a few times after this. But John Romita was one of the first to do that. So, my other thing I wanted to do since we're here, no man, do I have that available? This is one of my favorite images that he did. This is the most Ditko image that he's ever done of Spider-Man, where Spider-Man's legs are forward and his back is almost to camera. And so the person who does like John Romita is one of the guys, the perfect anatomy, and this is the most spidery pose that he's ever done, where the whatever the joints in his back are totally twisted around. It's such a great. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
um,
it's a good shot.
and then what else I wanted to do? One of the things this is one I had as a kid. No, I think I had the next issue, which is next issue is
Okay.
him and Gil Kane, but this one he
Yep.
did the art by himself, and it's just like he did the inking and the inking, and that's what he initially wanted to do when he came to Marvel was just ink. He was totally out of penciling, and Stan brought him back to it, and you can see post the 70s, you can see less and less um,
Oh,
actual.
you got that's a good story. You don't gloss over that. Tell people the story.
But
How how Stan got him to Marvel.
you do it. You do it. That's on you. I want
Well,
to.
he had already done what is the I think he did about 8 years of DC with the Romance comics, and then they had done the Romance comics had a ton of inventory, so when interest started to die down, they could still keep the Romance comics going, but they weren't paying for any new stories at the end of the day. And Romita thought he really felt he had been just burned out as a penciler. But Stan, okay, who doesn't get enough credit for being an editor, heard that Romita was leaving DC and he was trying to transition from DC because he was still doing like a bunch of freelance work, but he was trying to transition from DC into getting like a like a full time ad job. And
Mm-hmm.
Stan grabbed him before he got his feet set at any other place, and he said, "No, no, come over to Marvel. I'll match I'll make certain that you're going to get whatever you're going to get over there. You can work at home, you can work there." Ramita's still like, man, look, I don't got it anymore. I just want to do the inks. I'm burned out and so on and so forth. He's like, no, I got this guy on Daredevil and I don't really like what he's doing. And Stan has the stuff. And it's like a 3 hour lunch over that he tells me. He's like, here, check these images over here. Show me what you would do with it. And Ramita does that. Stan loves everything. He gets on Daredevil, and the sales improve. Now, again, this is like with nuance at the end of the day. But the sales for Daredevil improve, and then he actually starts testing them out. Then he starts testing them out for Spider-Man while on Daredevil, and the rest is history. But Stan had a really good eye as for what he wanted and for what he thought would work pretty well, and what he thought would work pretty well, at least with Daredevil. Only 8 issues. Ramita only did 8 issues on Daredevil, at least initially. He may have come back and done some other stuff, but that's then from there it just leapfrog to Spider-Man, which he and those are first initial issues. He thought Ditko was coming back. He couldn't
Mm-hmm.
imagine why anybody would walk off a book that was that selling that well. And then I think about we get like 6, 7 issues in, and that's when we actually see Ramita start. Look, I'm gonna do this my way at the end of the day, and that's what would happen. And him and did one shot. Him and Gil Kane did a ton of covers for Marvel between
Yeah.
what is that? I think like between late, maybe like from '68. I don't remember the exact time, but just a ton of covers. I mean, literally, you name it, they did it. Amazing Spider-Man, Marvel Team Up, Thor, ton of covers, both of them. You would be so surprised. I would look at something, I was like, oh, that's Gil Kane. No, that's Kane and Ramita. Oh, that's Ramita.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's Ramita and Gil Kane. Those guys were, I mean, literally, the only other team that I know of that worked and did that much stuff together is Murphy Anderson and Kurt Swan. You just look. They just did a ton of that stuff at the end of the day. But you got Gil Kane and you got John Romita Jr. You don't waste it. And like you said, that's what Romita had wanted to do when he came to Marvel. He's like, look, I really want to scale this back. And as art director, yeah, you come over, you do some covers, you ink one, you draw one, and you're all right.
Well, what was it? The only ad that when he got to Daredevil, and he even says, I think it says the usual the pencil and wizardry. When Stan saw the full issue that he did, he's like, "This is a little quiet." So he's called up Jack Kirby, and Jack Kirby did like a sequence where you see Ditto jump out a window, it land on two moving cars, and then Romita said, "Okay, I got it." So it was he said from him doing plots, it was a constant struggle but at the same time, and trying to get these things to stand would just basically say, hey, next month this guy's the villain. Like, and him with his family and his kids, they would kind of working together. Where I guess his kids kind of help him with energy, asking him questions and stuff like that. Which obviously
Yeah.
John Romita Jr. has another son too, which they would be around while he was doing this stuff. So, but yeah, he's from there, from what you were saying, and the interesting part is that he, to his peers like Kirby and Buscema, they really recognize him as a great artist. He kind of saw himself as not the creator that Kirby or Ditko were, but they'd see him throwing out a page and they'd be like, Romita, throw away the eraser. You're like, that's a good drawing. Like, don't throw that away and that sort of thing. So it's like, and so they, a lot of people saw how great he was. But at the same time, it's interesting because when Kirby left, he said he did talk to Romita and said, stick with me, Romita. I'll make you a genius yet. And he wanted to drag him over to DC to do the New Gods. And I think as far as editing and money wise, that probably DC was never going to match anything that Marvel was doing. So that didn't happen. But he said, I always think about if I would have left with Kirby, what would have happened? And it'd been interesting, even if they kind of, because we've seen Romita Inc. Kirby stuff, and I kind of look at who is it? Steve Rude is kind of a merger of what Kirby, because like Kirby, his Kirby, like Steve Rude's Kirby is the cleanest Kirby, so it kind of reminds me a little more like it has a lot of Romita in it. So that's, I feel like, what his New Gods would have been if that actually happened. But I always think that DC should have really conned him into doing a Superman thing, like if not just drawing it, because they say they got Kirby, but they were struggling with how ugly that Kirby was. Like, why not just get the guys that were the Michelangelos? Why don't they pay money and give Buscema and
Yeah, that's
and
something we should do a show on. We should do a show on that with the whole thing with Kirby and the his face. Well, because you're talking about the whole thing with Romita and the faces being drawn, Romita drawing the faces over,
well,
and
I
then you
mean,
get over. We should do something on what was going on with Kirby, because that I always thought that was taken like well out of context, because they would that wasn't like something that was specifically done to Kirby in terms of changing his faces. That was done to everybody.
well, I mean, not to even get that far into it, just having him, like, because Kirby was thinking of just editing and Romita drawing, and I think Romita on his angle being like, well, I probably would kind of try to move to inking, but I'm not even thinking. I'm just thinking he should just done Superman in general. Like, I would think Buscema should have been. I mean, we've seen him do like Superman and Spider Man, but I think getting Romita over there, or Gil Kane with Romita, some sort of combination. It would have been interesting to see him do like a couple issues, of Superman type of deal. Since because it wouldn't be plot, it'd probably be full script, and it might work to his advantage. But yeah,
Did he ever?
hmm?
Did he touch up? I'm trying to remember. I know Neil Adams on the Amazing Spider Superman versus Amazing Spider-Man. I know Ross Andrew is credited with doing the art, and I know Neil Adams came and saw some stuff, and he was like, "No, he did the faces over for like I think some of the Superman stuff." But did John Romita come over and touch up anything for Ross?
Yeah,
For Ross
yeah.
Andrew?
I
Yeah, that's
think
what I thought.
I think he would do it on the same, doing whatever they could to make it as we're selling both these well, Neil Adams is more, Marvel is more. I know that Ross Andrew knew that that Romita would come in, and anything that he wanted to add, he would add. But Neil Adams just like in Continuity Studios, he just like
Yeah, he
now
just
he made it like it was an agreement between him and Ross Andrew. Neil Adams just walked in and said, "Nope, we're gonna redo this."
yeah. Neil Adams was like, "What? Give me a pencil," and that was pretty much it. Those nice behind the scene things, but
And this issue
the
here is a Terry and the Pirates one where he like kind of tried to get an issue that was a couple issues with in Vietnam that where he was inking himself and really like pulling out all the stops at this point. So it's like one of the things where you see someone. I mean, he kind of when he talks about other artists, even Burn, he's like, "Oh, I would have learned so much coming to his house." And it's like Burn's like, how can this guy say that? Look at the stuff he's done." But I wanted to pull some of this stuff out to kind of show. But you were about to say something when I chimed in. What were you about to say?
No, actually, I lost it. I actually lost that train of thought.
Oh, I'm sorry, but we had him on Cap, like him doing a bang up job on Captain America, like redesigned the Falcon. Gave him something close to what we would know later. Get him out the green outfit. I was a fan of the red one, but look. I mean, come on, he's just he's just a master of the form, even if he didn't. And the artist editions, I think. I don't
They
know.
did one. Have they done one for Romita yet?
Dude, I got um they got two. I think there's a third one, but I definitely got two. I have the Gil Kane one that has inks by John Romita, but then they have two that John Romita did. I think there's a third one of his, but it's really nice. I mean, most of that stuff is Spider Man. It's inked by Jim Mooney and a couple other guys, Frank Giacola. But it's just like, I mean, it's great stuff. It's just like, and I hadn't planned on because I'm a big. Well, no, as a kid, I bought he did the covers for the origins of. You can tell that he was the guy because he did the covers for the origins of Marvel Comics and Son of Origins, and there's a Fantastic Four book that he did the cover for. So it's like all of that stuff was kind of he was the brand, or at least the face wise was the brand of these things. But in that, it had a Ditko first issue of Spider Man, and then it had Spider Man versus the Shocker. And as a kid, all I cared about was Spider Man. So it was just like anything more of that. So it wasn't like the way people are now, where they look at a fill-in issue and then they're just like, "I need to jump off a roof." How did this fill-in issue get here? And it's like, as a kid, it's like, just give me more and more of this stuff. So it was never a thing where, even though I leaned more towards the Ditko stuff, when you get that early, and seeing that Spider-Man, no, actually, all of the early artists, Ross Andrew, Gil Kane, all those, they felt like the real kind of Spider-Man type of deal. Even even John Romita Jr., even though the Spider-Man he was doing was a lot tougher. But when I bought the annual with the new Captain Marvel with Monica Rambeau, John Romita Sr. inked it. So it was just like, oh, this John Romita Jr. is just as good as his father. It wasn't until later we see the X-Men where people are like, "Oh, how could he get him off these terrible type of deal?" And then we see, well, I know I gave that up after maybe complaining about John Romita Jr. on X-Men. I think it's around 180, where he has Professor Xavier like in the gym dribbling, and I was just like, "Oh my god!" They not only is Professor X walking, now he's playing basketball because Michael Jordan's hot, and then John Romita Jr. does a sequence where he's dribbling, and I was just like, "Wow, that's really cool." It's like I don't know who else could have done this sequence this well because he
Well,
does the dribbling and then
you gotta
shoot.
let him play a little basketball. He got a brand new body from the Shi'ar. This guy can't.
The kid is like, "This is wrong. This is wrong." And then he won me over with that sequence. I was just like, but keep going. Sorry.
He's got a brand new body from the Shi'ar. If he can't dunk with that, what's the sense?
So,
So I didn't. It didn't matter to me anyway. I said I know they're gonna put him back in a wheelchair eventually. So just enjoy it while you enjoy it. Enjoy it while it lasts.
well,
I said they can't. I said they won't let Ben. I said Ben Grimm is never going to get to change from the thing to Ben Grimm and Professor Xavier. Your fate is in a wheel. Well, I don't know what they're doing with them right now, but I already knew. I already knew with the Marvel stuff. That's usually how it tended to go. So I was like, okay,
going the definite side note on that,
yes.
with what's the name with Chris Claremont, he kind of realized with the death of Jean, like, hey, maybe this change will work for you, where Marvel's been keep the status quo, and then as he was going along, let me see how I can change that. Oh, Storm is Punk Storm, the Professor X can stand, and then it's like you can see around issue 184, he realized, wait a second, Professor X being able to stand Once he's up to speed, he basically doesn't need the X-Men. That's why he has the X-Men, because he's in the wheelchair. And then soon after, he gets rid of Plus X for 5 years, and the plan was to kill him. He's going to be at least a disembodied spirit after that. He's going to be killed by the Shadow King. He's just like, you're really trying to make change. But ultimately, we've seen it. Oh, also, there's some classic covers that he did layouts on. Like a lot of, we don't really look at it. We see the cover artists and we think, like the same way a lot of, I mean, obviously Neil Adams did some great covers, but there are a lot of great covers that Carmen Infantino designed, which obviously Neil Adams turned into gold. And at the same time, a lot at Marvel, they had a lot of cover sketch artists, and you had to gain the company's trust to do covers. Like someone like, that's why you have a lot of Dave Cockrum covers over Burns stuff. Well, Dave Cockrum kind of forced his way into doing covers on it, where thinking he was going to get on Burns' nerves, but Burns was a big fan of Cockrum, so he was like, "Oh, they should have told me I wasn't good enough," so that was it. But from there, you see a lot of cover. I haven't seen a lot of cover sketches, but there's Heroes for Hope by Arthur Adams, which is a classic cover. That's a John Romita sketch. Like that whole basic, outside of the Wolverine's a little more bent over, but the whole layout of the people are the same as that.
And
And
that I did not know that. I did not know that that was a John Romita senior sketch.
in
I
the
did not.
original, they let Arthur Adams do the original of classic X-Men #1, which was a little dull, and then John Romita did a sketch of it to kind of bring the characters where they should be, and Arthur Adams redid it to that too. So there's a bunch. I think there's a Brood cover that he did. Some even later stuff in the '90s that he did some cover sketches. So I haven't seen all of them. I've seen maybe like 4 or 5. So not only character design, faces, a lot of the covers that were out there. There's some cover sketches that he did for them, being a guy in the office, and obviously Romita's Raiders that came out of basically Kirby never, keeping designs the same, and inkers would have to change it. From that point, they always had someone in the office, Marie Severin, and then John Romita took it over when he was doing. He was the art director, so he was constantly fixing and/or the stuff that I wouldn't understand it at times. Sometimes Shooter would do it for they make no sense. It's like, here's this image of Reed and Sue, right? Like I understand when who was it? Stan Lee's doing it, because Stan Lee is like, all right, we got this image of Reed and Sue having this tender moment. Let me turn it into a Romita moment. And it's like, yeah, he's in the office. It's like, I think I can get a little more emotion out of it. Let's have John Romita do it. Then I was looking at, I think, Burns' last issue of the Fantastic Four, and I seen someone peel back the original image. I was like, I don't know why. And as a kid, I didn't understand why this was a Romita moment. So Byrne called up and said, I didn't like that. Hey, John, hey, can you redo the Reed and Sue? Because he's the writer, and the artist. Like, did he decide? I didn't understand that the editor, the shooter would look at a shot and be like, that's not really right. So can you fix that? So like as the writer, you'd be like the same way Stan was. Can you fix that? Can you fix my drawing? Then when I saw it originally, I was like, what the hell? But that is the ultimate help, because you can see there's a lot of stuff as far as they were started from Kirby. Just keep things in line and keep things, consistency and continuity. He had people that would, that a lot of greats. So Scott Collins was in that group. There's a couple of people that not as big, that are artists that are online, but a lot of people came out of the Romita's Raiders that were guys that would fix books and keep things on time, that sort of thing. But any other last words on John Romita?
No, hey, a great talent. Definitely blessed to have him. Changed a lot. Well, rest in peace, John Romita Sr. There will definitely not be another like you. Oh, for those, if one other thing, for those of you guys who are Superman fans, he did do some Superman art. He did one cover. He did one cover because his son, John Romita Jr., was actually doing Superman. And even though I'm not a big fan of that outfit, it is the only cover that John Romita Sr. Actually did. I don't. This is the only art I believe he did for Superman at all. But it's all John. It's all John Romita Sr. So if you're a Superman fan, you're looking for something. That's a good piece to pick up for yourself. If you're lucky, you might even find one that's a bit more personalized. If you get my meaning.
And I guess I can bring up, or see from here, the magazine that he did that Stan was totally against. Like, no, let's not do this. I think this is the second one. The first one was black and white, and Stan was like, no, we don't need to do this. And it sold well enough where he did another one. And in this issue, I think it's somewhere in here. I don't know if we can be able to see it. But it's like the throwback, going back to the what's the name. But yeah, I mean, there's some classic stuff to get out there, some artist editions, the Superman cover. What else? This is a lot of great books to go and check out and see him do. And, as long as we have it in print, there's always going to be a way to see some of these guys. But I didn't get into any of my Marie Severance stories of the jokes that he gagged, but imagine them being back together and somewhere in the heavens, and they have to, both him and Trimpy have to deal with Marie Severance doing more jokes about them. So R.I.P. Great work, great body of work, and thank you for keeping that consistency that was started with Kirby and Ditko and Stan all together. They were able to keep it, whereas we even got a new strip. Those I think they're going to try to do a decent volume for that. I think that might be an artist edition too. They're going to try to get that together, which
That would be really cool. That would be really cool if they could actually. Well, it's a new strip, so yeah, they shouldn't have too much difficulty putting that together. All that stuff is still on file.
But seeing that as a kid was one of the major things, especially the corner where he looks like he's struggling holding the bus, and the Spider-Man in the in the comics probably could hold the bus up with one hand, but that's kind of the strength for Spider-Man that I like. They're not that strong, but anyway. All right, so we're gonna spin a rack.
Out.
Out.